Stop worrying. Not because your situation is small or unimportant, but because you were never designed to carry it in the first place. Somewhere in your life right now, there is something you keep going back to in your mind again and again. You replay it, overthink it, try to solve it mentally, and in doing so, it only starts to feel heavier and more overwhelming. But here is something most people never realize. The act of worrying is actually what keeps the problem active in your experience. You were conditioned to believe that solutions come through stress, overthinking, and constant control. Yet a deeper truth exists beneath all of that noise. The moment you step out of worry, life itself begins to align and support you in ways you cannot force. This is not about fake positivity or pretending nothing is wrong. It is not denial of reality. It is about understanding how your inner world actually shapes your outer experience. When you truly grasp this, you begin to see that releasing worry is not giving up, it is regaining control at a deeper level. Worry is not something that simply happens to you. It is something you participate in, often without realizing it. And once you see that clearly, its grip on you naturally starts to weaken. Every single worry is your imagination being used in a direction that does not serve you. You are mentally constructing scenarios, emotionally living through them, and then reacting as if they are already real. You keep rehearsing outcomes that have not happened yet, and your body responds as though they are happening right now. That is why anxiety feels so real and exhausting. You are repeatedly experiencing a future that does not even exist. The mind was never meant to function as a machine that predicts failure or disaster all day long. Its natural purpose is creativity, expansion, and solution building. But when worry becomes a habit, that same creative power is redirected toward fear. Instead of building possibilities, it starts building problems. And the important thing to understand is that imagination itself does not judge what you feed it. It does not label anything as good or bad. It simply expands whatever direction you give it. When guided by fear, it multiplies fear. When guided by trust, it begins to create calmness and order. So the goal is not to fight your thoughts or force them away. That only creates more resistance. The real shift happens when you gently redirect your inner focus. Instead of constantly asking yourself what could go wrong, you begin to allow a different inner assumption to form, one that things are actually unfolding in your favor, even if you cannot see how yet. Not as wishful thinking, but as a quiet inner alignment. The moment your imagination changes direction, your entire internal state begins to shift. And when your internal state changes, your perception of life changes with it. Eventually, what you experience externally begins to reflect that inner transformation. Worry loses its power not because problems magically disappear, but because you stop continuously feeding them with emotional energy. Imagination is not something random or meaningless. It is deeply powerful and creative. When you stop misusing it for fear-based thinking, you naturally return to a more stable and peaceful state of being. Life then starts to feel less forced and more fluid. Things begin to unfold with less struggle and more clarity. Many people believe that progress only comes through pressure, overthinking, and constant effort. They assume that if they worry enough or try hard enough, eventually things will fall into place. But reality does not respond to stress. It responds to something much deeper than effort alone. What truly shapes your experience is assumption, what you consistently accept as true within yourself. The quiet beliefs you hold about your life become the structure your external world follows. It is not desperation that moves life forward. It is identity. Life does not rearrange itself based on how much you plead or struggle. It responds to the version of you that you consistently embody internally. When your inner assumption shifts, your outer reality begins to reorganize itself accordingly. This is why letting go of worry is not about ignoring responsibility. It is about stepping out of unnecessary mental suffering and returning to a state of trust, clarity, and inner stability. From that state, your actions become more effective, your decisions become clearer, and your energy is no longer scattered by fear. You were never meant to live in a constant cycle of mental pressure. You were meant to move through life with a sense of inner alignment where action flows naturally, not forcefully. When you stop feeding fear with your imagination and instead begin to place your awareness in trust, something subtle but powerful begins to change within you. And from that change, life itself begins to respond differently. When you try to force outcomes in life, it often leads to exhaustion and inner resistance. The struggle is not only about what you are trying to achieve, but about the state you are operating from while trying. Most of the time, people attempt to change their external reality without first shifting the inner position they are viewing it from. And that is where the real conflict begins. Assumption is very different from effort. It is quiet. It does not argue or push. It simply rests in a deep inner sense that something is already true. It is not loud thinking, it is a settled feeling. When you assume something, you are not hoping for it or chasing it. You are mentally and emotionally accepting it as already done. When you assume health, your body begins to respond in subtle ways. When you assume peace, even difficult situations start to feel less intense. When you assume success, opportunities begin to appear without the constant struggle. This is not some mystical trick, it is alignment between your inner state and the reality it reflects. Effort comes from a place of, I need to make this happen. Assumption comes from a completely different place. This is already unfolding. And the moment you shift from effort driven thinking to assumption, something inside you relaxes. The mental pressure begins to dissolve. You are no longer searching for confirmation everywhere because within yourself you feel settled. Life works like a mirror. It reflects the state you consistently hold within. So when you stop trying to force outcomes and instead begin to live from the feeling that things are already resolved, your experience starts to shift. Ironically, constant effort can delay results because it carries an unspoken message of lack. It suggests something is missing or not yet complete. But assumption carries the feeling of fulfillment, and that inner fulfillment becomes the language life responds to. Living through assumption means you no longer wait for the external world to give you permission to feel complete. Instead, you move inwardly into that feeling first. You think, speak, and act as someone who already has what they desire, not from pretending, but from embodying the state internally. As this becomes more natural, the need for effort reduces. Life begins to feel less like resistance and more like flow. You start to notice something deeper. It is not that life suddenly starts helping you, it is that you stop interfering with it through constant mental struggle. It feels as if things were always being guided in the background, and your only real task was to stop resisting that guidance. Often, problems remain in your experience not because they are truly unsolvable, but because they are still emotionally active within you. They are not fully finished inside your inner world. The moment something feels complete internally, it begins to lose its grip externally. Thinking alone is not enough to change this. The mind can analyze endlessly, but it is feeling that finalizes your state. Life does not respond to repeated words or surface level affirmations alone. It responds to the emotional condition you return to again and again. If your inner state is still filled with urgency, fear, or tension, the situation continues to feel active and unresolved. But when that inner state shifts into calmness, relief, or quiet certainty, something powerful happens. The problem begins to dissolve from within. Feeling the solution is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about allowing yourself to experience the emotional result of resolution before anything physical changes. It is stepping into the inner experience of completion first. A simple question can guide this shift. How would I feel if this situation was already fully resolved? And instead of analyzing further, you rest gently in that feeling. No forcing, no struggle, just allowing it. Relief is one of the clearest signs that your inner state has shifted. When your breathing becomes easier, when your mind stops tightening around the problem, that is when something within you has already changed. And when it changes within, life has no choice but to reflect that new state in time. In the end, you realize something very important. Life was never waiting for more effort from you. It was waiting for you to stop fighting it internally and begin living from a state of trust, completion, and quiet certainty. When the mind finally stops running in circles and the body begins to relax, something important happens within you. The inner process is already complete. In that stillness, creation is finished on the inside, and the outer world has no choice but to begin adjusting itself to match that settled state. Most people make a simple mistake. They wait for life to improve before they allow themselves to feel calm. They believe peace is something that comes after everything is fixed. But the truth works in the opposite way. Peace is not the result of resolution. Peace is what creates the space for resolution to appear. When you decide to feel resolved in the present moment, you stop resisting your own life. You stop delaying your good. That quiet feeling of it is already handled does not demand attention. It does not constantly check for evidence. It simply rests in trust without needing validation. And trust is not passive. It is deeply creative. The more natural this sense of completion becomes within you, the less room there is for worry to survive. At that point, there is nothing internally left to fix or fear. You have already accepted on a deeper level that the outcome is settled. When you consistently return to the feeling that your desire is already fulfilled, life begins to respond in alignment with that inner state. It has no option but to mirror what you are steadily holding within. In this sense, feeling becomes the instruction you are giving to reality itself. When that feeling is fully embodied, the solution starts to form effortlessly in the external world. But the moment you start asking, how will this happen? Something subtle changes inside you. You step away from trust and slip back into doubt. That question pulls you out of faith because it belongs to a limited, analytical part of the mind. It assumes that the path is uncertain, complicated, or beyond reach. And in doing so, it creates tension and resistance. The mind always wants structure. It wants timelines, explanations, and visible steps before it allows itself to relax. But life does not operate in that way. If you insist on knowing the process in advance, you are trying to control something that is far greater than your current perspective. Every real transformation in life unfolds without you needing to understand the mechanics behind it. You never question how your heart keeps beating or how a seed turns into a tree. It simply happens through an intelligence that already knows exactly what to do. In the same way, your situations resolve themselves naturally when you stop mentally interfering with them. Constantly asking how keeps you stuck in waiting mode. It delays acceptance and pushes peace into some imagined future. And as long as peace is postponed, the problem continues to feel active. Faith is not about blindness or ignorance. It is about inner rest. It is the ability to remain steady without requiring proof before you feel safe. When you release the need to figure everything out, you allow a deeper intelligence, far beyond logic, to operate freely in your life. Letting go of how is not irresponsibility. It is alignment. You stop trying to micromanage the unfolding and instead focus on the end result, the feeling of completion. The process is no longer your burden to carry. And when you reach that state, something remarkable happens. Life begins to move in ways you could not have planned. Unexpected openings appear, people show up at the right time. Situations shift quietly and naturally. Later, when you look back, you realize everything unfolded with perfect timing and ease. Your mind may never fully understand the path, but life does. And once you truly trust that, the need to question disappears. It is replaced by calm certainty and inner peace. Inner peace is not something you earn after everything is fixed. It is not a reward for solving problems. Inner peace is a direction you choose, a state you hold, and that state becomes the instruction you are giving to life itself. No instruction is stronger than peace. When you are at peace, you stop resisting what is happening. And resistance is what keeps problems alive. It is the inner argument that says things must change before you are allowed to feel calm. Peace ends that argument completely. And when the argument ends inside you, the situation outside begins to lose its emotional weight. It no longer has anything to feed on. Peace does not mean ignoring reality or pretending challenges do not exist. It means you are no longer fighting reality internally. From that state, life begins to reorganize itself quietly, naturally, and in ways that feel almost effortless. It means you no longer allow external situations to control your inner state. You stop giving problems authority over your peace. And in that moment, something powerful shifts. You take back your creative power. When you choose peace, you are no longer feeding circumstances with emotional reaction. Instead, you allow things to settle on their own. And from that inner stillness, solutions begin to emerge naturally, without force or pressure. Life responds very quickly to this kind of inner quiet. You may notice unexpected openings appearing where everything once felt stuck. Conversations that were tense begin to soften. Situations that seemed blocked start to move again. But this shift does not come from pushing harder or trying to fix everything. It happens because your inner peace removes the resistance that was holding everything in place. Peace is powerful because it is built on trust. It carries the quiet knowing that everything is already being handled in a deeper way. And that inner assumption activates a kind of intelligence that is far beyond personal effort or planning. When peace becomes your natural way of being, you no longer rely on constant visualization or repetitive affirmations. You don't need to convince yourself over and over again. Your calm presence itself becomes the message you are sending out into life. Most people try to create peace by fixing external conditions first. They believe once everything improves, then they will finally feel calm. But it actually works in reverse. Peace is not the result of a changed reality. Peace is what allows reality to change. The moment you choose peace internally, your outer experience begins to adjust accordingly. That is why making peace a daily decision is so important. Every time fear appears, you gently return to it. You make it your foundation, your quiet strength, your inner anchor. When peace is in control within you, life naturally begins to reflect balance and harmony outside of you. And over time, you realize something very important. Peace was never just the absence of problems. It was always the solution itself. This understanding is something many people never fully see. Peace is not something you earn after everything is solved. It is a choice available to you right now. And the moment you truly choose it, the problem immediately begins to lose its influence over you. At that point, you stop chasing answers. You stop struggling against circumstances. You stop mentally fighting what is happening. Instead, you rest in a deeper knowing that whatever you have fully accepted within yourself must eventually express itself in your outer world. So tonight, you can simply let it go. Put down the mental burden you have been carrying. Allow yourself to feel what relief would be like if you were no longer holding everything together with tension. Let that feeling become your natural state again. Because the moment you stop worrying, you also stop interfering with the natural flow of life. And when you stop interfering, something greater than your personal effort begins to move freely through your experience. Trust that. Live from that inner stillness, and you will begin to notice how life unfolds in ways you could never have planned or forced. Thank you for being present with this message. Thank you for choosing awareness instead of fear and trust instead of struggle. If this reached you in the right way, take a quiet moment for yourself and simply sit in the peace that is already within you. And if you feel called to, share this with someone who may need this reminder today. Until then, stay steady, stay grounded, and remember, what you are looking for is already closer than you think. Everything this message is pointing toward comes down to a very simple but deeply transformative truth. You were never meant to live in a constant state of mental struggle, and you were never required to carry every burden through worry, overthinking, or emotional exhaustion. The mind has a habit of believing that control comes from constant analysis, repetition, and effort, as if thinking about something enough times will eventually force it into resolution. But life does not respond to pressure the way the mind expects it to. Instead, life responds to something far more subtle, far more powerful, and often completely overlooked. The inner state you consistently return to when no one is watching, when nothing is being forced, and when you are simply being with yourself in silence. When that inner state is filled with worry, resistance, fear, and urgency, everything in your experience tends to feel heavier, more complicated, and more delayed. Not because life is punishing you, but because you are unconsciously feeding the very conditions you want to escape. But the moment you begin to understand that your attention and emotional energy are not neutral, that they are creative forces shaping your perception and experience, something begins to shift inside you. You start to realize that worry is not harmless thinking. It is participation in an unwanted outcome. It is mental rehearsal of what you do not desire, repeated so often that the body begins to believe it and the nervous system begins to respond as if it is real. This is why exhaustion builds, why clarity disappears, and why situations seem to remain stuck even when you are trying your best to solve them. It is not because you are doing too little, but because internally you are still anchored in the very feeling of lack, struggle, and uncertainty. And from that state, every action becomes slightly misaligned, no matter how much effort is applied. This is where the deeper truth begins to emerge. Real change does not begin with more effort, but with a shift in state. When you move from worry into awareness, from resistance into acceptance, from mental chaos into inner stillness, you are no longer pushing against life, you are allowing life to reorganize itself through you. In that space, something very quiet but very powerful takes place. Your imagination is no longer being used to predict failure, but to rest in trust. Your attention is no longer scattered across imagined problems, but gathered into a settled sense of completion. And in that state of inner completion, something remarkable happens. Your experience begins to soften. What once felt heavy starts to lose intensity. What once felt blocked begins to loosen. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding it with emotional resistance. This is the turning point most people miss. They believe peace comes after resolution, but in truth, peace is the very condition that allows resolution to appear. When you are peaceful, you are no longer arguing internally with reality. You are no longer saying this should not be happening or this must change before I can be okay. Instead, you begin to occupy a state of acceptance, and in that acceptance, you withdraw the energy that was previously sustaining the problem. This is why peace is not passive at all. It is deeply creative. It is not surrender in the sense of defeat. It is surrender in the sense of alignment. But life does not require you to know the process in advance. Just as you do not consciously control your heartbeat or the growth of a seed into a tree, there is a deeper order already at work in your circumstances. When you release the need to mentally engineer every step, you create space for that order to express itself without resistance. And in that space, peace becomes your foundation instead of your reward. You stop waiting for life to give you permission to relax, and instead you choose relaxation first, knowing that everything flows more clearly from that state. This is the hidden shift that changes everything. Not doing more, not worrying more, not trying harder, but becoming still enough to allow life to move through you instead of against you. When this becomes your way of being, worry naturally loses its authority. Not because problems disappear instantly, but because they no longer define your inner world. You stop living inside imagined outcomes and begin living from a grounded sense of trust. And in that trust, something quietly powerful takes place. You realize you were never separate from the intelligence that guides everything. You were never abandoned, never behind, never stuck in the way you thought. You were simply caught in a habit of mental interference that made everything feel heavier than it truly is. And now, as that interference softens, life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like an unfolding. You are no longer forcing outcomes, you are allowing them. You are no longer chasing peace, you are recognizing it. And in that recognition, everything begins to reorganize itself around a calmer, clearer version of you. That is the real conclusion of this entire understanding. Not that problems vanish because you fought them harder, but that they dissolve because you stopped feeding them, stopped resisting them, and returned to the quiet power of inner peace, where life has always known how to take care of itself.